Apple's new iPhone XS is a modest step up from last year's iPhone X, but for anyone who's running anything other than the 10, it's a major leap forward. The XS comes in at the exact same premium price, but you get quite a few more features, mostly attached to the camera, but also added performance, extra RAM, dual SIM, and better cellular connectivity. However, there's a major problem with the iPhone XS. It feels just like last year's iPhone X, and if you're gonna spend another grand, you want to feel a difference. Sure, it does have a new gold finish, but a lot of people use cases anyways. There's also the larger XS Max, which we think changes the whole game, so we made a completely separate review for that. As for the iPhone XS, we don't recommend buying it if you've already got the 10, unless you've got a pretty thick wallet. But for everyone else, let's dig deep and see what's so special about the new iPhone. Let's start with the biggest and most valuable change, the camera system. Apple mentioned a new, bigger sensor on the wide lens with deeper pixels, which means more pixel well depth, which allows each pixel to store more photons, basically light, before it saturates and starts leaking electrons to neighboring pixels, which is basically what you know as noise. Deeper pixels also make for better color saturation and increased dynamic range. Just check out these two photos. As you can see, the XS gets less noise, much better colors, and a huge jump in dynamic range. But that's not only due to the deeper pixels. You can also thank Apple's new Smart HDR feature. In short, the camera is able to snap more photos at different exposures in a shorter amount of time so that you don't get any motion blur. It then merges the dark images with the brighter images to get seriously impressive dynamic range. We're talking high-end camera dynamic range. For a quick example, you can see a bright hot spot on the ceiling on the iPhone X's image, as well as a dark spot under the vase. The iPhone XS is able to keep the image looking balanced and natural, and the colors look way better as well. And you'll see some of those same improvements in video as well, as long as you're not shooting at 60 frames per second. Plus, you finally get stereo audio recording. The camera is also a heck of a lot smarter now that the neural engine, which we'll get into later, works with the image signal processor, doing things like making portrait mode blur more accurate. Speaking of portrait mode, there's the new depth control feature. This might remind you of other phones like the Galaxy Note 9, but with the XS, it's basically been perfected, with a much greater range of blur adjustment. And it doesn't just increase the size of the bokeh, it wraps directionally in relation to where it's at in the frame, just like a professional camera lens. Apple mentioned the speed of Face ID is improved on the XS, but to be completely honest, it still feels the same as an iPhone X on iOS 12, which isn't a bad thing. It's already incredibly quick considering everything it's doing. When we compared the Note 9 to the iPhone X, it seemed like Samsung has finally caught up in terms of performance. Almost exactly a month later, we've got the XS with the new A12 Bionic chip, built on a new 7nm process, leading to more performance while using less power. In terms of the CPU, there's honestly not that much of a difference, but looking at graphics, we see a really nice performance jump. This will help for everything from rendering apps to augmented reality scenes and games. The new 8-core neural engine can now process 5 trillion operations per second, up from 600 billion with the A11's neural engine, which helps pave the way for the future of machine learning. In terms of actual daily use, anyone coming from an iPhone X or 8 won't notice much of a difference besides camera improvements and maybe gaming performance improvements. The display on the iPhone XS is pretty much identical to the iPhone X, but the OLED display is leaps and bounds better than any LCD-based iPhone display. Now here's a really cool feature. The XS now has dual SIM, which doesn't mean much to a lot of people, but anyone who wants 2 different plans or is using 2 different phones for 2 different reasons, this might make the XS worth it by itself. The radios have also been upgraded with gigabit LTE, and you can visually see the difference with new bands on the top and bottom of the iPhone XS. Tests showed that the performance difference can be significant, but we tested this in our office and we got identical LTE speeds, and I still got the same 3 bars of T-Mobile service. So the improvements assume your signal and network is strong enough to allow LTE speeds that high. There's also a new feature called Express Cards with Power Reserve. This means that if your battery dies, you can still use your phone to get onto the subway, bus, or enter your building if they support NFC-based access. On that note, battery life is rated at 30 minutes longer than the iPhone X, but if you really care about that, get the XS Max with an hour and a half longer battery life. The included 5-watt charger is a joke when you're paying $1,000, especially when Apple teases you with fast charging support, which requires a power adapter from a MacBook. The XS also doesn't come with the lightning to headphone jack adapter, which is disappointing for some, but I use AirPods, so I could care less. All in all, when directly compared to the iPhone X, the iPhone XS is a modest upgrade with significant improvements to the camera. Is it worth dropping another $1,000 this year? Not unless you have too much money to care. Now, if you're going from anything other than the iPhone X, we think you're seriously gonna love the iPhone XS. Sure, you're used to the home button, but it's a sacrifice you're gonna have to make within a couple of years anyways. Now, if you're coming from a 7 Plus or an 8 Plus, we think the XS Max and its massive screen is perfect for you. But if you don't want that large of a phone anymore, don't worry, the XS gets the same exact camera system. If paying $1,000 for a phone sounds like too much for you, you're probably best waiting for the iPhone XR, as it offers more colors and many of the benefits of the iPhone XS, including portrait mode with depth control. However, it's still got an LCD display with less than 1080p resolution. Last year, Apple made a giant leap forward with the iPhone X, and its success completely shook up this year's iPhone lineup. The XS, on the other hand, isn't another giant leap, but it's continuing down the path of Apple's brilliant rethinking of the entire iPhone platform, with significant camera improvements thrown into the mix for good measure. So if you're someone who skipped the iPhone X, it's a giant leap indeed, and seeing as it's got the same $1,000 price tag, you should be more than happy that you waited for the XS. I know I am. Thanks for watching, guys. We've got a whole bunch of iPhone XS and Apple Watch Series 4 videos in the pipeline, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, because we've got some pretty interesting stuff coming soon. Trust me.
If you enjoyed this video, like it and hit that subscribe button. Also, check out our price guide, which makes it extremely easy to find the best deals on Apple products, updated daily. Be sure to follow us on social media, and we'll see you in the next video.